The emergency signal came through the darkness of space like a scream. Captain Jiwan stood in the command center of the human ship Serenity's Edge, watching the red warning lights flash across every screen. The sound was horrible. It was the kind of sound that made everyone stop what they were doing and listen. "What is that noise?" asked Commander Hyunwoo as he rushed into the command center. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. In all his years in space, he had never heard anything like it. "It's a distress call," Guan said quietly. She was a tall woman with gray hair and scars on her face from old battles.
Oh.
But not from humans. "This is coming from the Altoni." The Altoni were a peaceful race that lived on the far edge of the galaxy. They looked like tall, thin people with blue skin and large eyes. They had never hurt anyone. They spent their time making beautiful art and studying the stars. Most humans had never even seen one. "Play the message," Guan ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was broken and full of fear. It spoke in the Altani language, but the ship's computer translated it into human words. "Please, anyone who can hear this, we are dying. They are killing everyone. Our children, our elders, everyone. We have no weapons that can stop them. Please help us. We will give you anything. Just please help us." The message repeated again and again. Each time it played, the voice sounded more desperate, more hopeless. Doctor Minji walked into the command center. She was the ship's expert on alien races. She had studied the Altani for years and knew their language well. When she heard the message, tears started to fall from her eyes. "They're not just asking for help," she whispered. "They're begging. This is their final message before they all die." Juwan looked at the star map on the main screen. The Altani. Homeworld was marked with a red dot. Round it she could see the positions of Vorthok ships. There were hundreds of them. The Vorthok were different from the Altani. They were a race of warriors who lived only to fight and conquer. They had thick, gray skin and sharp teeth. They carried weapons that could destroy entire cities. They had already taken over 12 star systems, killing billions of people. "How long do the Altoni have?" Jiwan asked. "Maybe 3 days," Dr. Minji replied. "Vorthok don't usually take prisoners. They just kill everyone and take what they want." The command center became very quiet. Everyone knew what this meant. The Galactic Coalition had tried to stop the Vorthok before. They had failed every time. The Coalition's ships were too slow, and their weapons were too weak. The Vorthok had better technology and more ships. "Captain," said Lieutenant Doyon, who was young with black hair and worried eyes, "the Coalition has already lost 3 major battles against the Vorthok. Our allies are scattered across the galaxy. Can't reach them in time." Gaywan nodded. She had been expecting this day for a long time. The day when someone would call for help and the normal ways of fighting wouldn't be enough. "Own fleet?" asked Commander Hyunwoo. "We have 40 ships in this sector, against hundreds of Vorthok warships." Dr. Mingi shook her head. "It would be suicide. The Vorthok ships are bigger and stronger than ours. Their weapons can cut through our armor like paper." The Altani message played again. This time the voice was even weaker. In the background, they could hear explosions and screaming. The Vorthok had started their attack. Giwan closed her eyes and thought about her choices. She could ignore the message and keep her ship safe. She could try to fight with normal weapons and probably die. Or she could do something that would change the galaxy forever. "There is another option," she said slowly. Everyone in the command center turned to look at her. They had never heard her speak in that tone before. It was cold and distant, like she was talking about something terrible. "What do you mean?" asked Hae-in-woo. Ji-won walked to a secure terminal in the corner of the room. She placed her hand on a scanner and spoke a password that only she knew. The screen lit up with files marked "Top Secret and Authorized Personnel Only." "For the last 20 years we have been preparing for this moment," she said. "We knew that someday the normal ways of fighting wouldn't be enough. We knew that someday we would need to use something darker." She opened a file labeled Project Nightmare. The screen showed pictures of humans in strange armor and weapons that looked like nothing anyone had ever seen before. But the most disturbing part was the look in their eyes. They didn't look human anymore. "What is this?" Dr. Mingi asked, but her voice was shaking. "Our answer to the Vorthok," Ji-won replied. We took the worst humans we could find. Killers, criminals, people who had no mercy, and we made them into something else. Something that could fight monsters by becoming monsters themselves. Commander Hyun Woo stared at the screen. You're talking about using people as weapons. Talking about saving the Altani, Giwon said. And maybe saving the galaxy. She activated her personal communicator and spoke into it. Control this. Is Captain Juan? Authorization code Alpha 779? I need to speak to Project Nightmare Command. Voice answered immediately. It was flat and emotionless, like a machine. This is Nightmare Command. State your request. We have a situation. Vorthok are attacking the Altani homeworld. Standard military response is inadequate. Requesting deployment of special assets. There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again. Understood. Pandora's box is ready for deployment. Awaiting final authorization. Giwon looked around the command center. Her crew was staring at her with fear and confusion. They didn't understand what was happening, but they could feel that something terrible was about to begin. Authorization. Granted, she said into the communicator. Wake them up. The communicator went silent. In the deep parts of the ship, machines began to work. Lights started flashing in rooms that had been dark for years. And in special chambers hidden from the rest of the crew, things that had once been human began to wake up. The Altani message played one more time. But now, help was coming. The question was whether the help would be worse than the problem. Lieutenant Do-yeon walked through the corridors of the ship like he was going to his own death. The elevator took him down to levels he had never seen before. Each floor he passed had more security than the last. Armed guards stood at every checkpoint. Warning signs covered the walls in multiple languages. Danger authorized personnel only, psychological evaluation required, lethal force authorized. The deeper he went, the more his hands shook. Captain Ji-won had given him orders to escort Dr. Su-young to the special weapons area. She had not told him what he would find there. The elevator stopped at the lowest level of the ship. The doors opened to reveal a hallway that stretched into darkness. The walls were made of thick metal, and the air was cold. Red lights blinked along the ceiling like warning signals. Dr. Su-yang was waiting for him. She was a small woman with tired eyes and gray hair. She had been working on Project Nightmare for 15 years. She looked like she had not slept in days. Are you ready for this? She asked Do-yeon. I don't know what this is, he replied. You will, she said sadly. And you will wish you didn't. They walked down the hallway together. The only sound was their footsteps on the metal floor. At the end of the corridor was a massive door marked Special Weapons Division. Dr. Su-yang placed her hand on a scanner and spoke her name. The door opened with a heavy sound. Inside was a room that looked like something from a nightmare. Dozens of glass chambers lined the walls. Each one was filled with a green liquid that glowed softly. Inside each chamber was a human body floating in the liquid. But these were not normal humans. Do-yeon stared at the closest chamber. The person inside had been changed. Her muscles were bigger and stronger than any human should be. Strange metal pieces were attached to their skin. Their eyes were closed, but something about their face was wrong. It looked hungry even while sleeping. What are they? He whispered. Used to be the worst criminals in human history, Dr. Su-yang said. Murderers, war criminals, people who killed without mercy. We found them in prisons across human space. She walked to a control panel and began typing. Numbers and charts appeared on screens around the room. We didn't just change their bodies, we changed their minds. We took away their fear and their conscience. We made them perfect at killing. Do-yeon looked at another chamber. This one held a woman with scars covering her arms. Even floating in the liquid, she looked dangerous. How many are there in this room? 200 more in other parts of the ship. Each one is designed to be the perfect weapon against a specific type of enemy. Dr. Su-yang pressed a button, and one of the chambers began to drain. The green liquid flowed out through tubes in the floor. The body inside began to move slightly. The Vorthok are strong and fierce, she continued. So we made our weapons stronger and more fierce. The Vorthok fight with honor. Our weapons have no honor at all. The chamber opened with a hiss. The man inside opened his eyes. They were completely black, like holes in his face. He looked around the room, and his lips pulled back in a smile that showed too many teeth. Asset 7, Dr. Su-Yang, said to the man, "You have work to do." The man stepped out of the chamber. Water dripped from his body, but he didn't seem to notice. He was tall and thin, but his muscles moved under his skin like cables. When he spoke, his voice was calm and friendly, which somehow made it more frightening. "Where are we going?" he asked. "To fight the Vorthok," Dr. Su-Yang replied. "They are threatening innocent people." The man's smile grew wider. "Good, it has been too long since I had proper prey." More chambers began to open.
Wow.
Men and women emerged from the green liquid. Each one looked different, but they all had the same hungry expression. They all moved with the same predatory grace. Do-Yan watched in horror as they put on their armor. It was black and covered with weapons he had never seen before. The armor seemed to move by itself, adjusting to fit each person perfectly. "Have we done?" he whispered. Dr. Su-Yang heard him. "We have created the perfect soldiers. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be frightened. They cannot be stopped. They exist only to kill our enemies." Asset 7 walked over to where Do-Yan was standing. He looked at the young officer with those black eyes and tilted his head like a curious animal. "You were afraid," he said. "That is good. Fear keeps you alive, but you don't need to fear us. We're on the same side." "Are we?" Do-Yan asked. The man laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. For now, Commander Hyunwoo appeared in the doorway. His face was pale and his hands were clenched into fists. "Captain Juan wants to see the final preparations." Dr. Su-Yang nodded. "We're almost ready. The weapons are awake and armed. The transport ships are prepared. We can deploy them to the Altoni homeworld within the hour. And then what?" Hyunwoo asked. "Then we save the galaxy," Asset 7 said. "By giving it something worse than the Vorthok to fear." The other weapons had finished putting on their armor. They stood in perfect formation, 50 of the most dangerous beings in human space. They didn't look like soldiers. They looked like demons wearing human faces. Dr. Su-Yang began the final checks. Each weapon was tested for response time, weapon, systems, and psychological stability. But stability was a relative term. These beings were stable in their instability. They were consistently and perfectly violent. "Transport to Hangar Bay 7, Dr. Su-Yang announced. "Mission parameters are being uploaded to your neural implants now." The weapons moved as one group toward the exit. They walked in perfect silence, their armor making no sound on the metal floor. As they passed Do-Yan, he could smell something strange. It was the smell of old blood and something else he couldn't identify. After they were gone, the room felt empty and cold. Dr. Su-Yang began, shutting down the systems and cleaning the chambers. She worked quickly and efficiently, like she had done this many times before. "How long have you been making these things?" Do-Yan asked. 20 years, she replied without looking up. "Ever since we realized that being human might not be enough to survive in this galaxy, and now?" Dr. Su-Yang stopped working and looked at him. Her eyes were full of sadness and regret. "Now we find out if we were right." Admiral Korthak stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the Altani homeworld grow larger on the main screen. The planet was beautiful with blue oceans and green continents. Soon it would be another trophy in the Vorthok Empire. "How many ships do they have left?" he asked his second-in-command. 37 small vessels, sir. No heavy weapons. No shields worth mentioning." Korthak smiled, showing his sharp teeth. The Vorthok were tall and strong, with gray skin that was hard as stone. They had been fighting wars for thousands of years. These peaceful Altoni would be easy to defeat. "Begin the assault," he ordered. "Leave no survivors." The Vorthok fleet moved forward like a wall of death. There were over 300 ships, each one armed with weapons that could destroy cities. The Altani ships tried to fight back, but their weapons barely scratched the Vorthok armor. Then space itself seemed to tear open. A massive black ship appeared from nowhere. It was longer than any Vorthok vessel and covered with weapons that pulsed with strange energy. The hole was so dark. It seemed to absorb light itself. "What is that?" Cortex demanded. "Unknown vessel, sir. It's not in our databases." The black ship broadcast a message on all frequencies. The voice was calm and cold, speaking perfect Vorthok. "This is Captain Jiwan of the human vessel Serenity's Edge. You have been judged guilty of genocide. Your sentence is death," Cortex laughed. "Humans, these soft creatures think they can challenge us. Open fire on their ship." A dozen Vorthok vessels fired their main weapons at the human ship. The energy beams that could destroy mountains hit the black hole and simply disappeared. Human ship didn't even slow down. "Impossible," whispered the weapons officer. "Nothing can absorb that much energy." "Fire everything," Cortex ordered. "Destroy them now." The entire Vorthok fleet opened fire. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles streaked toward the human ship. The space around it lit up like a star. When the light faded, the ship was still there, completely undamaged. Then it was the humans' turn to attack. The weapons that came from the black ship were unlike anything the Vorthok had ever seen. They didn't just destroy ships. They seemed to know exactly where to hit to cause the most pain and fear. Escape pods were targeted first, so no one could flee. Medical bays were hit next, so the wounded could not be treated. But the real horror began when the human boarding ships appeared. These were small, fast vessels that cut through Vorthok holes like knives. From each one came creatures that looked human but moved like hunting animals. They wore black armor that seemed to bend light around it. Weapons fired energy that didn't just kill but caused terrible pain. Asset 7 led the first boarding party onto Admiral Cortex's flagship. He moved through the corridors like death itself, his black eyes scanning for targets. When he found a group of Vorthok soldiers, he didn't just kill them. He studied them first, learning their fears. "But you smell like fear," he said to one wounded. "Vorthok, good. Fear makes the meat taste better." The Vorthok soldier tried to raise his weapon, but Asset 7 moved too fast. His blade cut through the alien's armor like paper. But instead of killing him quickly, Asset 7 made small cuts that would cause pain but not death. "Please," the Vorthok gasped. "Just kill me." "Where would be the fun in that?" Asset 7 replied. "I haven't had a good hunt in years." Other human weapons moved through the ship with the same terrible efficiency. They didn't just defeat the Vorthok. They broke them. They found ways to hurt them that went beyond physical pain. They attacked their minds and their spirits. On the bridge, Admiral Cortex watched his fleet being destroyed. Ship after ship was boarded by the human creatures. He could hear the screams of his warriors over the communication system. These weren't the sounds of soldiers dying in battle. These were the sounds of beings having their souls torn apart. Sir called his communications officer. "We're getting reports from all our ships. The humans aren't just killing our people. They're torturing them. They're playing with them." Ash! Cortex felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Real, cold fear that made his hands shake. "Send the retreat signal." All ships fall back, but it was too late. The human weapons had reached the engine rooms of most Vorthok ships. Vessels couldn't move even if they wanted to. They were trapped, waiting for death to come for them. Asset 7 reached the bridge of the flagship. He walked slowly, enjoying the terror on the faces of the Vorthok officers. His armor was covered in blood, but he didn't seem to notice. "Admiral Cortex," he said pleasantly, "I've been looking forward to meeting you." "What are you?" Cortex demanded. "I'm what humans become when they decide to stop being human," Asset 7 replied. "I'm what your people have created through your cruelty." He moved closer to the Admiral. "I studied your species for weeks before we came here. How your minds work? I know what you fear most. Corthex tried to be brave. We are Vorthok. We fear nothing. Asset 7 smiled. Everyone fears something. Let me show you what you fear. What happened next was too horrible to describe. The other human weapons entered the bridge and began their work. They didn't just kill the Vorthok officers. They took them apart piece by piece, studying their reactions, learning from their pain. Across the fleet, the same scene was repeated. The mighty Vorthok Empire, which had conquered 12 star systems, was being destroyed by creatures that had once been human. But these creatures fought with a cruelty that made the Vorthok look gentle. On the Serenity's edge, Captain Jiwan watched the battle through her ship's sensors. She saw her weapons moving through the enemy vessels like viruses through a body. She saw the fear in the Vorthok communications. She saw an empire dying. "Captain," said Commander Heinwu quietly, "the Vorthok fleet is finished. Should we recall? Our boarding parties?" Guan looked at the tactical display. 300 Vorthok ships were now either destroyed or crippled. The few survivors were broadcasting surrender messages in every language they knew. "Not yet," she said. "Let them finish their work. The galaxy needs to learn what happens when you threaten innocence." Dr. Minji stood beside her, tears streaming down her face. "We've become monsters," she whispered. "No," Giwan replied. "We've become something worse. We've become necessary." The battle was over, but the screaming continued for hours. When it finally stopped, the Vorthok Empire was finished. The survivors would carry the memory of this day for the rest of their lives. They would tell others what they had seen. Would spread the word that humanity had weapons that could destroy more than just bodies. The Altani homeworld was safe, as the peaceful, blue-skinned people could continue their lives of art and learning. But the price of their safety was something that would haunt the galaxy forever. In the darkness of space, the human weapons returned to their ship. They were covered in blood and their eyes were bright with satisfaction. They had done their job well, too well. 3 months after the battle, the news had spread across the galaxy like a disease. In every spaceport, on every planet, people whispered about what had happened to the Vorthok fleet. The stories were all different, but they all agreed on one thing: the humans had not just won. They had done something horrible. Dr. Minji sat in her laboratory on the Serenity's edge, studying reports from the battle. Her hands shook as she read the psychological profiles of the Vorthok survivors. Every single one showed the same pattern of trauma. It was not normal battle shock. It was something much worse. "The survivors aren't just afraid," she told Commander Heinwu. "Their minds have been broken in very specific ways. Someone who understood Vorthok psychology did this to them on purpose." Heinwu looked tired. He had not slept well since the battle. "What do you mean?" "I mean that our boarding parties didn't just kill Vorthok soldiers, they studied them first. They learned exactly how to break each individual mind. This wasn't random violence. This was planned psychological warfare." She showed him brain scans of the survivors. "Look at this. The trauma patterns are identical in all of them. Someone programmed our weapons to cause this exact type of damage. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Doyen was having his own problems. He'd been assigned to help contain the human weapons after their return from battle. What he saw in the holding cells made him sick. The creatures that had once been human sat in their cells and talked about the battle like it was a pleasant memory. They described the Vorthok they had killed with the same enthusiasm other people might use to talk about a good meal. The big one with the scars tried to run. Asset 7 was saying to Asset 12, "But I caught him in the engine room. Do you know what fear smells like when it's mixed with desperation?" Asset 12 laughed. "Tell me." "Like flowers dying in winter." Beautiful and sad at the same time, Doyan felt his stomach turn. These things were not just weapons. They were weapons that enjoyed their work. They found pleasure in causing pain and terror. He tried to access their psychological files, but found that his security clearance was not high enough. When he asked Captain Jiwan about it, she just looked at him with tired eyes. "Things are better left unknown," she said. But Dr. Su Yang was not sleeping either. She had run full psychological tests on all the returned weapons. What she found disturbed her more than anything in her 20 years of research. Asset 7 had been a serial killer before his transformation. He had murdered 15 people in brutal ways. The psychological conditioning was supposed to control his violent impulses and direct them only at enemies. But the process had done something else. It had made him remember being human while choosing to be something worse. "I remember my mother," he had told her during the evaluation. "I remember how she used to make bread on Sunday mornings. I remember loving her." "And how does that make you feel?" Dr. Suyang had asked. "Hungry," he had replied with that terrible smile. "It makes me hungry for more." The other weapons showed the same pattern. They had not lost their humanity. They had chosen to abandon it. They remembered love and kindness and joy. They simply preferred pain and fear and death. Dr. Suyang realized with horror that they had not created weapons. They had created monsters that remembered being human and decided they liked being monsters better. Captain Juan was dealing with her own problems. The Galactic Coalition had sent investigators to ask questions about the battle.
They wanted to know what kind of weapons
humanity possessed. They wanted to know if these weapons were a threat to other civilizations. Ambassador Sung-hoon met with the coalition representatives on a neutral space station. He was a skilled diplomat who knew how to give answers without revealing information. "We used advanced tactical units," he told them. "Specialized personnel trained for extreme combat situations." "What kind of specialized personnel?" asked the coalition investigator. "A tall alien with green skin and large eyes. That information is classified for security reasons," Sung-hoon replied smoothly. "The Vorthok survivors describe creatures that seem to take pleasure in causing suffering, they say. Your people didn't just fight, they tortured." Sung-hoon's face remained calm. Psychological warfare is a legitimate military tactic. The Vorthok have used it themselves in previous conflicts. But the investigator pressed further. "We have reports that your boarding parties targeted escape pods and medical facilities. They killed wounded soldiers who pose no threat. War is not pleasant," Sung-hoon said. "The Vorthok showed no mercy to the billions they killed. They received the same treatment they gave to others." The coalition investigators left with more questions than answers. They had learned nothing useful about human weapons. They had learned something about human nature that frightened them, back on the Serenity's edge. Dr. Minji finally confronted Commander Hunwoo with what she had discovered. "I've been researching Project Nightmare," she said. "What we did to those people was not just modification, it was corruption. We took the worst humans we could find and made them worse." Hunwoo looked uncomfortable. "They're effective." "They're evil," Minji replied. "And the worst part is that they choose to be evil. They remember being human, remember love and compassion. They simply prefer cruelty." She showed him video files from the battle. "Look at this." Asset 7 had a Vorthok. Soldier helpless on the ground. He could have killed him quickly. Instead, he spent 20 minutes studying the alien's fear responses. He was conducting an experiment. An experiment in what? In how to cause maximum psychological trauma. It wasn't just killing an enemy. It was learning how to break the minds of an entire species. Hyunwoo watched the video with growing horror. "We created them to save the galaxy. We created them to traumatize the galaxy," Minji corrected. "We looked at the universe and decided that the best way to keep peace was to become something so terrible that no one would dare fight us." The truth was slowly becoming clear to everyone involved in the project. Humanity had not just created weapons, it created a new form of warfare. They had weaponized human evil itself. The question that haunted Dr. Minji was whether this was evolution or corruption. Had humanity become something better by embracing its worst aspects? Or had they simply become another type of monster? At night, she would stand in her laboratory and look out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vorthok survivors were telling their story. They were describing what humanity was capable of when it chose to abandon its conscience. The galaxy would never be the same. Other species would look at humans differently now. They would remember that behind the friendly faces and diplomatic words, there were creatures that could become something worse than any nightmare. Dr. Mingi wondered if this was what humanity had always been underneath. Perhaps the capacity for such evil had always been there, waiting for the right excuse to emerge. Perhaps Project Nightmare had not changed humans at all. Perhaps it had simply revealed what they truly were. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but in her dreams she could hear Asset 7 laughing. The sound echoed through the darkness like a promise of things to come. Ambassador Sun Kon arrived at the Coalition Council station with a heavy heart. The formal inquiry had been inevitable. Representatives from 47 different species wanted answers about what had happened to the Vorthok fleet. The truth was something he could never tell them. The council chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in a circle around a central speaking area. Alien beings of all shapes and sizes filled the seats. Some had skin like crystals, others looked like walking plants. All of them were afraid. Ambassador Sung Hoon called the council speaker, a tall being with 4 arms and silver skin. Please tell us about the human weapons used against the Vorthok. Sung Hoon stood at the center of the circle, feeling the weight of dozens of alien eyes upon him. The humans deployed advanced tactical units to protect the Altani homeworld. These units were highly effective in neutralizing the Vorthok threat. The survivors described creatures that seemed to enjoy causing pain, said a representative from the Zelani Republic. They say your people tortured prisoners. War is not pleasant, Sun Kun replied, using the same words he had practiced for weeks. The Vorthok Empire had destroyed 12 star systems. They showed no mercy to billions of innocent beings. Our response was proportional to their crimes. But the questions kept coming. The representatives had spoken to Vorthok survivors. They'd heard stories that made even veteran soldiers sick. They wanted to know what kind of beings could fight with such cruelty. We have reports that your boarding parties targeted medical facilities, said another representative. They killed wounded soldiers who posed no threat. In war, there are no safe spaces, Sung Hoon answered. The Vorthok learned this when they attacked peaceful worlds. We simply applied the same logic to them. The questioning continued for hours. Sun Kong gave the same careful answers again and again. He spoke of advanced tactics and specialized personnel without ever revealing the truth. The representatives left frustrated and fearful, back on the Serenity's edge. The real confrontation was happening in private. Dr. Mingi had requested a meeting with Commander Hyun-woo in his quarters. What she had discovered could not be discussed. In public, I've been investigating Project Nightmare on my own, she told him. What I've found changes everything. Hyun-woo looked nervous. What do you mean? Mean that the project wasn't designed to create weapons? It was designed to create fear. The psychological profiles of our boarding parties were carefully crafted to maximize not just physical damage, but mental and spiritual destruction. She showed him classified files she had obtained through her research. Look at this. Asset 7 wasn't just modified to be a better killer. He was modified to be a better torturer. His programming includes detailed information about the psychology of 43 different alien species. That's just tactical information, Hyun-woo said weakly. This is information about how to break their minds, Minji replied. How to cause the maximum amount of psychological trauma. How to make them afraid not just of death, but of the very concept of fighting humans. She opened another file. Asset 12 was programmed with knowledge of Vorthok family structures. Not so she could fight them better, but so she could threaten their children in ways that would cause the most emotional pain. Hyun-woo sat down heavily, saying that the project was designed to traumatize entire civilizations. Minji finished. To make them so afraid of fighting humans that they would never dare to threaten us again. We didn't create weapons, we created instruments of terror. The horrible truth was becoming clear. Humanity had looked at the galaxy and decided that the most effective way to maintain peace was to become something so terrible that no one would dare to oppose them. They had weaponized not just human violence, but human evil itself. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Doyan was discovering his own disturbing truths. His assignment to monitor the returned weapons had given him access to their debriefing sessions. What he heard in those sessions made him question everything he thought he knew about his own species. The Vorthok commander begged me to kill his family quickly, Asset 7 was telling Dr. Suyang. He said he would give me military secrets if I would just end their suffering. And what did you do? Dr. Suyang asked. I told him I would consider it. Then I made the suffering last longer. The hope in his eyes made the despair so much sweeter when I took it away. Dr. Suyang made notes on her tablet. And how did that make you feel alive? ASAT-7 replied. More alive than I had felt in years. Pain is the purest form of communication. It cuts through all the lies and pretense. It reveals truth. Doyan listened to these sessions with growing horror. Weapons weren't just effective killers. They were philosophers of cruelty. They had developed their own theories about pain and fear and suffering. We're not just soldiers, Asset-12 had said in another session. We're teachers. We teach other species what happens when they threaten humanity. The lesson is written. In blood and screams, Dr. Suyang seemed to be documenting everything. She asked detailed questions about the weapons' methods and motivations. She wanted to understand how their minds worked, how they justified their actions. Do you ever feel regret? Asked Asset-7. Regret for what? He replied. For saving the galaxy, for protecting innocent lives, for giving the Vorthok exactly what they deserved, for the suffering you caused. Asset-7 laughed. The suffering was the point. Without suffering, there is no learning. Without fear, there is no respect. We have taught the galaxy to respect humanity. The most disturbing part was that the weapons genuinely believed they were heroes. They saw themselves as protectors of the innocent, defenders of the weak. They had simply chosen to protect through terror rather than through strength. Dr. Suyang finished her evaluations and presented her findings to Captain Juan. The results were both better and worse than anyone had expected. The psychological modifications are holding, she reported. The weapons show no signs of turning against human targets. They remain loyal to their mission. And the psychological effects on them, Ji-Wan asked. They're stable in their instability. Dr. Suyang replied. They have fully integrated their modifications with their original personalities. They don't see themselves as monsters. They see themselves as evolved humans. Is that good or bad? I don't know, Dr. Suyang admitted. They're incredibly effective. They've achieved something we never thought possible. They've made the galaxy afraid of us. Captain Juan looked out at the stars through her office window. Reports were coming in from across human space. Other aggressive species were suddenly being much more diplomatic. Trade negotiations that had been stalled for years were suddenly moving forward. Territorial disputes were being resolved peacefully. It's working, she said quietly. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy is at peace. At what cost? Dr. Suyang asked. At the cost of our souls, Ji-Wan replied. We've become something that other species fear more than they fear war itself. The question that haunted them all was whether this was a price worth paying. The galaxy was safer now. Innocent species like the Altani could live without fear of conquest. But humanity had purchased that safety by becoming something that would be remembered as a nightmare in the depths of the ship. The weapons waited in their cells. They were content with their work. They'd saved the galaxy by showing it what true horror looked like. They had brought peace through terror, order through chaos, and in the quiet moments between missions, they dreamed of the next time they would be needed. They dreamed of new species to teach, new minds to break, new fears to explore. The galaxy was at peace. But it was a peace built on the promise of unspeakable violence. And that promise had a human face. 5 years had passed since the Vorthok Empire fell. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Captain Ji-Wan, now promoted to Admiral, stood in the expanded Project Nightmare facility and looked at what her decisions had created. The room was 10 times larger than before. Hundreds of glass chambers lined the walls, each one containing a human being transformed into something else. The green liquid glowed softly in the darkness, and the figures floating inside looked peaceful. But Ji-Wan knew better. They were weapons, waiting to be used. How many do we have now? She asked Dr. Suyang. 800 active assets, Dr. Suyang replied. Another 200 in various stages of modification. And we have a waiting list? A waiting list? Yes. After the reports of our success spread, volunteers began to step forward. They want to serve their species in this way. Juan felt a chill run down her spine. Volunteers? Dr. Suyang nodded. They come from all walks of life.
soldiers,
scientists, even civilians. They believe that becoming a weapon is the highest form of human service. She led Guan to a new section of the facility. Here, the chambers were filled with people who had once been normal humans. They had given up their humanity willingly, choosing to become something that could protect their species through terror. This one was a teacher, Dr. Su Yang said, pointing to a chamber containing a young woman. She volunteered after reading about the Altoni rescue. She wanted to make sure that no other innocent species would suffer what the Altoni almost suffered. This one? A father of 3? His children were on a colony world that was threatened by raiders. He volunteered to ensure that his family would always be safe. Juan stared at the floating figures. These weren't criminals anymore. These were good people who had chosen to become monsters. What have we done? We've created a new form of human. Dr. Su Yang replied. One that exists to protect the others. Lieutenant Doyan, now promoted to commander, joined them in the facility. He had been monitoring the effects of the program on human society. What he had found was disturbing. The psychological evaluations are complete, he reported. The modification process is no longer reversible. Once someone becomes a weapon, they remain a weapon forever. You tried to reverse it? Juan asked. We tried everything. Psychological therapy, memory reconstruction, even surgical removal of the implants. Nothing works. The changes go too deep, affect the very core of who these people are. Dr. Su Yang had been researching the same problem. The modifications don't just change the body and mind, they change the soul. The people who undergo the process become something fundamentally different from human. Different how? They lose the ability to feel empathy for non-humans. They can still love their families and care about other humans. But aliens become nothing more than potential threats or targets. They stop seeing them as people. Guan looked at the chambers full of volunteers. And they chose this willingly? They see it as evolution, Doyan said. They believe that humanity needs to become something stronger to survive in the galaxy. They think that normal humans are too weak, too soft. The program had become more than a military project. It had become a religion across human space. People spoke of the weapons with reverence, called them the guardians or the protectors. Shrines were built in their honor. Children played games where they pretended to be weapons saving the galaxy. They don't see them as monsters. Doyan continued. They see them as heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice. They gave up their humanity so that the rest of us could remain human. Admiral Giwan walked to the memorial hall at the center of the facility. The walls were covered with plaques, each one bearing the name of a person who had been transformed. What had once been a small collection of criminals' names had become a vast monument to sacrifice. She stopped in front of a new plaque that read Teacher Minseo, volunteered to protect the innocent. Below it was another, Engineer Taman, gave his humanity for his children's future. How does the rest of the galaxy see us now? She asked. Dr. Su Yang pulled up reports on her tablet. Trade agreements are being signed without negotiation. Territorial disputes are resolved in our favor immediately. 3 different species have offered to become human protectorates. 8. They're afraid of us. Terrified, Dr. Su Yang confirmed. But it's working. There hasn't been a single act of aggression against human space in 5 years. The Krellin Syndicate disbanded their raiding fleets. The Mordok hierarchy withdrew from contested systems. Even the mysterious Phantom Collective has avoided human shipping lanes. Reports painted a picture of a galaxy transformed by fear. Species that had been enemies for centuries were now working together, united by their shared terror of what humans might do if provoked. The peace that had eluded the Galactic Coalition for generations had been achieved in a single brutal demonstration. About the Vorthok survivors? Giwan asked. They formed a religious movement, Doyan replied. They call it the Church of Human Warning. They spend their time traveling to other worlds, telling the story of what happened to their fleet. They warn everyone to never, ever threaten humanity. A religion based on our weapons? They worship our weapons as dark angels, Dr. Su Yang explained. Divine beings sent to punish evil and protect the innocent. They've turned Asset 7 into a mythological figure. They call him the bringer of judgment. Admiral Giwan felt sick. An Asset 7. How does he feel about being worshipped? He finds it amusing, Dr. Suyang said quietly. He says that fear is the most honest form of respect. They walked to the observation deck where they could see Earth in the distance. The blue planet looked peaceful and beautiful, but Juan knew that it now represented something different to the galaxy. It was no longer just the human homeworld, it was the source of nightmares. Admiral, said Commander Doyen, there's something else you should know. We've received requests from other species. What kind of requests? They want us to create weapons for them. The Centauri Republic offered us 3 star systems in exchange for 50 modified soldiers. The Andromedan League wants to purchase the modification technology. In our response, we refused, of course. But the requests keep coming. Every species wants what we have. They want their own monsters. Dr. Suyang looked troubled. Some of our scientists think we should share the technology. They argue that if every species had weapons like ours, it would create a balance of terror that would guarantee peace. Or it would create a galaxy full of monsters, Giwan replied. The observation deck fell silent. Outside, space looked the same as it always had, but everything was different now. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had created perfect peace through perfect terror. Do you think we made the right choice? Doyan asked. Admiral Jiwan thought about the Altani, safe on their beautiful homeworld, creating art and studying the stars. She thought about the billions of beings across the galaxy who could sleep peacefully because they knew that something terrible would protect them from other terrible things. I don't know, she said finally, but I know that we can never go back. In the depths of the facility, Asset 7 sat in his cell and read reports from across the galaxy. He smiled as he learned about the fear his kind had inspired. Other species spoke of humans in whispers now. They told stories of the dark ships that came from nowhere and the creatures that brought nightmares to life. We did it, he said too. Asset 12 in the next cell. We saved the galaxy. By damning ourselves, she replied. Is there a difference? Asset 7 asked. We gave up our souls so that billions of others could keep theirs. We became monsters so that innocent beings could remain innocent. Isn't that what heroes do? Asset 12 considered this. I suppose it is. But heroes are usually mourned when they die, will be feared even in death. Good, Asset 7 said. Fear lasts longer than love. Fear protects better than kindness. Fear is honest. As the years passed, the story of humanity's dark weapons spread through the galaxy like a legend. Parents told their children about the humans who had given up their humanity to protect others. Historians wrote about the day when peace came to the galaxy through the promise of unimaginable violence, and in the quiet corners of space, in the places where beings gathered to share stories, they spoke in whispers about the species that had looked into the abyss and chosen to become the abyss itself. The galaxy was at peace. But it was a peace built on the foundation of willing sacrifice and chosen damnation. Humanity had become the galaxy's guardian angels. But their wings were black, and their halos were made of thorns. They had called for help, and help had come. But what answered was not salvation. It was something far more complex, far more terrible, and far more necessary than anyone could have imagined. The humans had become what the galaxy needed them to become. The question that would haunt the stars forever was whether that transformation was a blessing or a curse. Whether it was evolution or damnation. Whether it was the salvation of the galaxy or the death of the human soul. In the end, perhaps there was no difference. Perhaps that was the most human thing of all.